Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Well, welcome to Blindsight. I'm your host, Bill Lundgren, and I'm really glad to be with you today. And with me also is our producer, Jonathan Price, and he and I have a lot of fun talking about some of these topics together because, he's got good experience in terms of psychology, and I've been doing this job of counseling for more years than I'm willing to admit. So between the two of us, I'm expecting that this will be an informative show. So we're going to be talking about transitions. Right. And how are you doing, Jonathan, transitioning from one show to another to do these?
It's truly mental gymnastics because you go from sports to mental health to the blind chick and technology, and then it's kids, and then it's running up and down. It's the laundry. It's the oh my gosh! Every day is like a million different micro transitions that it's which is funny because they always say men's brains are very nice and neat and organized, and women's brains are all chaotic. And I like to joke that my brain is like walking down the most beautiful, organized Costco that you can ever just dream about. Everything is organized. It's put away. You take stuff out, and I don't know. It's great. It's nice being in my mind for every once in a while. It's just I have to run up and down the aisles and transition a lot faster than I want to.
That's right. That's right. Plus, the kids haven't gotten home yet. So when they get home,
that's right.
Further, I'm not so sure that men are so. Well, maybe I'm not a man because sometimes my brain is just absolutely short circuits, and which.
Well, there's a difference between short-circuiting and being organized.
Well, to help people with their organization, I want to start off this issue. Transition. There are so many transitions that we go through in our lives, and sometimes we go through it and we're not even aware of it. But and we'll be talking about transitions, different kinds of transitions, and what do we do? What are the usual things that we have to do? What are the unusual things, depending on the severity of the transition? And I want to give a couple of terms to help people to kind of think about what we're talking when we're talking transition. One is, and I've mentioned this in other programs, but I want to highlight it here. We tend to come from a position of either emotionality or what could be called the intellect, the logic, or a combination of both. And I would say ideally a combination of both. But emotion, is that piece of us that has enabled the Homo sapien to survive. Because if you have a man-eating predator coming after you, you don't want to sit there logically and see, this is identify what species it is, and otherwise then you're a goner. But on the other hand, you don't want, and that's when emotionality is really, get the hell out of here. But at the same time, we don't want to be responding to everything from an emotional level. Though you and I and members of the audience can probably identify people who are all emotion, very little logic involved. And there's some who are very pedantic, and everything has to be logically thought out before they take any action.
Yes.
And that's one concept. The other concept, which is, I think, very helpful, and we haven't talked about it, I don't think, and there are two words, distress and eustress. Now, distress, everybody knows, but also pleasant experiences can be very stressful. A friend of mine just got married. Very happy to get married. She's just delighted, but she was exhausted by the end of the wedding because, it's all this good stress can be as wearing as distress. And when we're talking about transition, they may fall in the distress area, the eustress, or maybe a combination of both, just as our reaction has to be perhaps some of it emotional, some of it logic, and the degree of which one or the other is dependent on the situation or what we're facing. Transition can be minor or they can be major. And when we talk, we talk about these transitions, we have to be aware of which one it is, or where it falls in the category. I like to talk about a range, say 0 to 5. 0, there's no stress, distress or eustress. 5 is a heightened. And 0 in emotionality for something, very high in emotion. And 1 to 5, whatever number you want to use, it's important to pay attention to the degree of severity of the transition. For example, we're going into a new school. Your kid changing school. That's going to be, depending on the individual, they may be anywhere in the scale of 0 to 5. They may consider it very stressful because they don't know what to expect. They don't have any friends going to the same school. They don't know the teachers a whole bit. Or it might be a transition to another section of the same school, like middle school to high school, and some of your friends are there, and you may, have somebody to lean on. So that might be a little less stressful. Certainly a major distress, major upheaval is a sudden onset of blindness. A trauma like an accident that causes blindness or a condition. Very, that's severe and for people. And to trying to deal with it is a lot of, I think I would be safe to say, distress in trying to manage that. But for somebody like me, I got the diagnosis, but it was I guess about 20 years before I really noticed, it was quite clear what the blindness that I was facing. So I had years so I could, I was distressed about it, but it wasn't as imminent as it was when it finally got there. And, that's the kind of thing that we have to be aware of. Or some pleasant experience like my friend who just got married, if you have a very expensive wedding, and which requires, a whole group of people involved in getting everybody in the same place and maybe even traveling somewhere to have the wedding. So that is stressful, high. Or it might be you elope or maybe have 1 or 2 friends and you go get married. That's going to be a little less stressful than, planning a whole wedding, I think.
Oh, sure.
But so when we talk about transition, we're looking at the severity of the transition. Now, when you think of transition, Jonathan, what are you thinking of? What kind of transitions are you thinking?
Well, seeing as that I've been through an enormous amount of transition in the last 18 months, 2 years, this is something that I'm very familiar with. I went through a divorce. Kids went to a new school, a new dance school for my daughter. Still maintained my job, but different house. There's a lot of things that transition. New church, new like all this kind of stuff.
So wouldn't it be?
And a couple of
Wouldn't it be lovely if it's just one transition at a time?
Well, yeah, it would be. And then I think to myself, as I kind of am the ilk that you just rip off the Band-Aid and do all the transitions at the same time. And just deal with it and hope that you are better on the other side. But there's a couple of things that I want to stress here when you're talking about transition. There's number one, there's an uncertainty and a fear of the unknown when it comes to transition.
The emotion part.
Change often brings a lot of uncertainty, which, it creates a lot of anxiety and fear. And when you don't know really what to expect, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by kind of what lies ahead.
Exactly.
Like deleting, that self-doubt and the insecurity. But then there's also this loss of routine and stability. Right. And if you don't plan ahead, you can get lost in that transition of familiar routines and who's going where and who's doing what. Are these going to be longer transitions than normal? Are there different familial settings? The absence of kind of like a known rhythm.
Right, the rhythm, right.
It can really affect mental well-being. And then identity crisis. If you're going through a transition and you're trying to figure out who you are, like, for instance, retiring from a really long career, 30, 40 years at the same place, or becoming a parent, you go from work or you go from being not a parent to being a parent. Now you're trying to figure out who you are as a parent and who you are as somebody who's retired.
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting transition identity crises there that you have to navigate.
Let's say you're laid off. It's
That's
sudden
right.
transition.
That's right.
And I'm laid off. I've been at this job for this much time. Who am I now? I'm unemployed.
That's exactly right.
What does that mean? And what am I supposed to be doing? And how do I occupy the time? And how do I find a new job? Do I want to find the same job, or do I want to do something else? All that very unsettling.
The uncertainty and fear, loss of routine, identity crisis, and then it goes to these feelings of isolation. When you're during these transitions, we feel kind of alone in our experiences. Like, I'm the only one going through the change. It can separate us from our usual support networks, like churches or friends and family or community. We feel isolated. Yeah. Or your literally your job. Absolutely. And then the last one you have like this physical and emotional stress, like what you were talking about, the good stress and the bad stress. A lot of times, if we're going through those transitions of physical transition, like we're moving from one city to another, that can be a stressful situation, both physically, since you're moving boxes, moving trucks, moving in and out of buildings, whatever. But then there's the emotional stress, the logistics of trying to figure out, where am I going to go? Who do I need to call? What do I need to change? The billing information, the bank cards, the credit cards, the change of address, all that kind of stuff is hyper stressful, and we don't give transitions in and of themselves the credit or lack thereof that they are due. And so when I think of all these transitional effects and feelings, that's what I have been through in the last 18 to 24 months. And while it's not fun, when you have the right mindset, like we talked about last week, transitions can become very manageable if you understand going what you're into. If you're going into the transition, going actually through the transition in the middle of it, and then post transition, how am I feeling on the other side of it? And if you have that right mindset, you're going to be set up for so much success. It's not even going to be funny. You're going to look at transition and you're going to say, look, let's go. All right, I'm ready. I can transition with the best of them. Let's do it.
If we know beforehand, and this is where the intellect comes in, when we look at it and say, this really is going to be a benefit to me. It can even be fun. I'm going to a new city, for example, and I'm going to have a chance to explore all these exciting things, and there are things that I can do in this new city that I couldn't do where I am now, and and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to really make it work for me, and that's an attitude shift, and it can be an important attitude. It's when we get frightened and our minds sort of shut down. That's when we get into trouble. This is when we've gotten into the emotion. We're not thinking clearly. And, sometimes, I describe it as somebody needs to hit us over the head with a 2x4 to wake us up and say, okay, let's look at, this is where some of the logic I'm talking about, look at the positives as well as the negative. We're looking at the negatives without any problem. But let's look at the positive. Like I said, I'm going to a new city, I'm going to have new experiences and so forth. But we forget that because the negative feelings that we have about stress in a transition. And the other thing that's real significant in what you were describing, and I'm in the middle of the same thing as you are in different ways, there's like 3 or 4 different aspects of my life that are in turmoil, and I'm having to be involved in dealing with them. Plus the fact that I'm, with retirement, and my whole being having to do with my work. Suddenly, I don't have that anymore. It's like, what do I do now? And, we're talking about the same thing, just different circumstances, but they're stressful.
Yep.
And we have to say, okay, wait a minute, this is going to be, I encourage people to know, understand, things are going to be stressful. But if you know that and you take care of yourself in this period of time of transition, and as you to jump on some things you said just a little bit earlier, if you prepare yourself, the worst stress is when you get in the middle of it and say, duh, what do I do now? I didn't know it was going to be this bad or whatever. Yeah. If we have some sense, well, it's going to be an upheaval. How am I going to take care of myself? And that's where we run into trouble. The self-care, where we say, okay, I'm going to have to get more sleep. I have to figure out, because what people do, like in a move, they don't give themselves sleep. And because I've got to pack, I've got to, And you know what? You probably didn't need to do that. Or maybe this is where you say, look, why do I think I have to do all this? Why can't I ask some friends to give me a hand? And, it's like just a little while ago, I had this project that I've been putting off for ages. And it's as stupid as getting my dog bed washed for the first time in God knows how long. And I didn't have anybody around to read the label, how you're supposed to put it in the washer. Well, fortunately, I called my neighbor, and she came over and read it. In fact, she said, look, I can take care of this, because I know you've got the podcast coming up and so forth. And I said, thank you. Stress relieved. And he's probably not going to sleep in the bed because it's so clean now, but that's his problem. The point is, I took care of myself. I said, why are you trying to read this?
Right.
This label. The machine didn't, my flatbed scanner didn't read it. So you call your
Right.
neighbor, and she came over and done. But you see, we think
Yeah.
when we're in a transition, that we're supposed to do it all. And that's the biggest mistake we can make.
Oh, yeah. So, what are some other coping, I guess, mechanisms that you would use during
Now,
transition?
the issue really is, and this is what I was saying earlier, to use the intellect as well as the emotion. I know I'm going to be entering this transition. What are the pieces that I'm going to have to deal with? And sometimes when you list them, they're overwhelming. But once you start dealing with them, they turn out to be a lot easier than you thought. And and you say, okay, I need to do this, this, and this in this order. And once I've accomplished those things, I'm going to feel better. And we also have to remind ourselves that, and this is, and particularly, I think more for men than women, but for all of us, we think we're supposed to do it all ourselves. We can't ask for help because asking for help, particularly for men, is a sign of weakness. That's why.
That's right.
Women get so furious with men who will drive all around the city and refuse to ask for direction. And, and then we just create more stress for ourselves. And, so it's a matter of saying, I don't have to do it alone. There are people who are more than willing to help me. To remember that I am the one that's doing it, which means I'm feeling distress. And that means that I have to keep in mind self-care. And one of the things that a friend of mine was talking about, he was studying for the Bar Association, for when it had to pass the bar. And he was working constantly. But a friend of his arrived with dinner and said, as of this moment, you're taking a day off because you can't absorb more stuff without taking a break. And that was the best thing in the world that she could have done for him, is make him stop studying. And then his mind was refreshed enough to start in again after he took that time off, and much more clarity. And that's what we have to keep in mind. Yes, I can spend X number of hours packing and doing this and doing that. But you see, I get so caught up. I can be so caught up in that I'm not taking care of myself, and I'm going to start forgetting, not doing some things, maybe even just falling over in exhaustion. So we're talking about taking care of yourself. If you're having an issue with transition, particularly in transition that you're in, and there's nothing to be ashamed of if you talk to a therapist to say, why am I having so much trouble with this? Or to a third party to help us kind of get that thinking process back again, to evaluate what's on a logical thing as well as the emotional, but take a logical look at what I'm doing, and is what I'm doing, the way that I'm doing it, does it make sense? And give yourself that break. And the other thing is also to say, look, there are some things that may not be necessary for you to do. And people hate that. But you let it go. And that's the kind of thing where, give yourself some time, write this stuff down. And so that you can say, well, let's see, again, I like this severity index. We say, or what you have people who are specialists in time management tell us that we have a to-do list. We enumerate it 1, 2, 3, and 1 must be done. 2, if the ones are done, and 3, if you don't get to it, so be it. And that'll help people. That logic helps people to sort of take care of themselves and to give themselves some breaks. And I guess whatever the transition is, you'll get through it. You just need to take care of it. Now, as I say, the things in this severity thing about transition, like I mentioned, sudden blindness, going to alcohol is not going to solve it. And yet that's what people do. Or whether any severity say, oh, I need some time to feel better, I'll have a drink. No, that's, in fact, when you're going through a transition, it's a good time to avoid mind-altering substances so that you can take care of yourself and maintain some clarity about what you're doing. The other thing is, again, going from the logic side, what's your goal? What's your ultimate goal? What are you, in making this change, what are you wanting to do? And keep your eye on that goal. Are you working towards that, or you're sabotaging yourself? And these are all thoughtful things, but you also have to respect. And I say it in capital letters: respect yourself, your emotional side that's maybe scared to death about what's happening. And that's human, that's to be respected. And, the truth, it probably won't be as scary as you anticipate it will. But just know, okay, I'm really scared. So what can I do to kind of calm it down, to help me feel like I have things under some sort of semblance of control, like what you were talking about, and all the things coming at you. It's like being attacked by, 1,000 gerbils. And, I think Defoe talks about in Gulliver's Travel, he's the land of the little people. And, there are hundreds of them, and he's laying on the ground all tied up because there's just too many people.
Tied up.
And that's the way we feel, can feel when we're in a transition situation.
That's right. Well, speaking of transitions, as we transition out of this episode into the next one, it'll be fun to talk more about some of the nuanced transitional styles. Anywhere from acknowledging that change is happening to leaning on support systems, how to form new routines, things like that. I think it's very important to talk about. And so if you have questions specifically surrounding those topics, feel free to drop us an email at feedback@aftersight.org. Or you can give us a call at 720-712-8856. I'll get those personally. I'll send them off to the hosts, and we'll be able to answer your questions directly. And then starting in October, once a month, we're going to be doing a live kind of recording of Blindsight and we'll send out the date. So if you guys want to be a part of that, you can email that feedback email address and say you want to be a part of it, and we'll also post it on our Facebook page and YouTube page. So those will be a lot of fun, and we'll be able to get some questions answered live, which will be great. But Bill, as we move out of this episode, is there anything else that you just really feel that people need to know moving forward?
Whatever transition you're in, you will get through it. Messy at times. It's like I'm saying that about this idea of a live podcast. Okay, Bill, you'll get through it. It's a transition for you from just recording to being live, but it's good for you.
Yes, it is. It's good to stress. It's that good stress. It's the good stress, Bill.
Okay, this is Bill Lundgren, your host of Blindsight with Jonathan Price, our esteemed producer, and we look forward to the next episode of Blindsight. Have a good week.